Hello and welcome to our final Tech Talks of 2020. I'm Jeff Blankenberg and I'm here today to kick off 4 individual little tips and tricks that we're going to give you for your Alexa development that you might spend over the holidays. When you find a little free time, you can watch each one of these independently. They don't build or grow on each other, so if you have 10 minutes, jump in, watch one segment and come back and watch another. But first, we're going to focus on something called the Amazon repeat intent. If this isn't something you've used before, it's not something that's built into skills by default. It's something that gives you the capability inside your skill to let your user say, can you say that again? Can you repeat that? So that's what we're going to work on first. So let me show you exactly how this works. First, you can see here on my screen that I have a stock skill. There's nothing fancy about this. It's your standard Hello World template that you could use building any skill. And I'm doing everything here in the developer console, but you could do all of this in the CLI just the same. But I think this is a good visual way to see what's happening. So the first thing that I want to do is actually add this intent to my skill. So I'm going to add this, and you can see that we create a custom intent or we can use an existing intent. Well, this thing already exists, so let's come in here, type in the word repeat, and you can find the Amazon repeat intent is right here. I'm just going to add this to my skill. And now when we look at my list of intents, you can see that I have the repeat intent sitting right down here. So that's good. That's our first step. And in order to make that work, we're going to save, and we're going to build our model, and we're going to let that process and run a little bit. So let's run over to our code. If we think about our code, this is, again, the stock code. I haven't made any modifications here other than to change my text. And so when the skill opens, it'll say, welcome to Holiday Hacks. What would you like to do today? Well, if a dog barks or the doorbell rings or my kids call for my attention or my phone rings or 1,000 other interruptions you might have in your skill, you're going to find that it's very easy to get distracted and stop listening to what Alexa might be saying to you. And in those cases, you want to be able to say, can you say that again? Can you repeat that? And that's what we're building. We want to be able to help your users solve that specific problem. So the first thing that we're going to do if we look at our launch request handler is we want to be able to store the information that we actually need. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call out my, my session attributes. That's how we're going to save this information. So the first thing that I want to do is say session attributes. There we go. And we'll say handler input dot attributes manager dot get session attributes. So what this does is gives us a reference to the session attributes that are held inside the JSON that we pass back and forth as we use our skill. And the next thing that I want to do is say session attributes dot, let's call it, since we call these functions speak and reprompt, I kind of like to use those as the reference so I know what I'm talking about. So we'll say previous speak, and we'll say speak output because that's the value that we have here, this welcome to Holiday Hacks. So we'll say that equals that, and then we'll say session attributes dot previous reprompt equals it also because we haven't adventured out. So it's 2 different values, but we're going to save them into each. So we have those retrieved values. So now when our skill runs, we're actually saving the thing that we said, this sentence, into our session variables. Okay, so we've got that piece. Now we need to actually handle our repeat intent. So I'm just going to copy this handler, and we'll bring it up here a little bit, and we'll call this the repeat intent. So this is the repeat intent handler. We're looking for the Amazon.repeat intent. So we have that. And then in here, what we want to do is instead of speak output, what we're actually going to say is, let's do, well, we need our reference to session attributes again, so let's do that. And then in the speak output, we're going to say session attributes dot previous speak and session attributes dot, come on, dot previous reprompt. So this will then take any values that we saved previously in our launch request, and it'll put that information down here as the response for when someone hits the repeat intent. And again, it's all trained and ready for people to say things like, what was that? Or can you repeat that again? So this should all work pretty well. So we could save this and deploy it. But while we're doing this, I want to talk about how this isn't actually the right approach for this. What we want to do is be able to have this kind of stuff happen automatically. We don't want to have to, in each one of our intents, go in and say, well, I want you to save this so that we can use it later. I'd rather have the entire application make one change and have that applied everywhere. And that's actually where we're going to go. So we have our deploy. So if we come over to the testing console and I say open holiday hacks,
welcome to Holiday Hacks. What would you like to do today?
and then I could say that again.
Welcome to Holiday Hacks. What would you like to do today?
Perfect. So she's repeating exactly the same thing that we heard the first time. So now we want to do it so that we don't have to make these changes everywhere. We can make it once and it just applies to everything in our skill. So I'm going to run back into our code and we're actually going to take this piece out. So we're going to take out the part where we save it inside our intent. We also don't need the session attributes. We'll get rid of all of that. So our launch request handler is back to the way it was when we started. But the way to do this is to use what we call a response interceptor. And if you haven't used interceptors before, there's two. There's the request and the response. The request allows you to capture the JSON that's coming into your skill before any of your handlers touch it. So you can get access to that raw JSON, make some changes, capture some data, do whatever it is you need to do, and then let your handlers do the things that they're supposed to do. On the other side, the response handlers, this is after you've done everything else and you're about to send your request back to Alexa to make the response. In that case, we can catch it right before it goes and make any modifications that we'd like. So down here at the very bottom, I have one more thing that I need to do, and that is to look at adding a response interceptor. So I have this commented in here just so I don't have to remember all the syntax, but you can see that I have add response interceptors and I have a response interceptor. What doesn't it like? Oh, because I also have to uncomment this. So in here, I have my response interceptor. So we've gotten rid of our red X's. But the inside here, this is how an interceptor works. We basically pass in the handler input, and we're able to do things with this before it gets fired off to Alexa. So the things that I want to do in here, the first one, as we saw before, is we want to capture our session attributes. So again, I'm opening this up. The next step is to figure out what the user was just told. Now, we haven't actually set it to them yet, but we're in the process of sending it. And so if you look at this, I'm capturing response. This is handler input.responsebuilder.getResponse. This should look familiar. This is exactly what we do when we make that final call out to send our response back to Alexa. The benefit of this is that we're not returning it. We're not sending anything anywhere else. That's already going to happen. What we're doing is grabbing it and making one small change to it before it finally gets shipped off. These last two lines, these are specific to saving our data. Remember previous speak and previous reprompt? This is where we create them. And what I do here is take that response that I got and grab the data out of it. So let's look at what that actually looks like. You can see here in my request, when I said the repeat intent, we actually have our normal response that gets sent every time we send a message back to Alexa to continue a conversation. But down here at the bottom, we have our session attributes, previous reprompt and previous speak. So I'm just assigning those values that came out of here into the session attributes. So you can see here that response.outputspeech.ssml maps perfectly to response.outputspeech.ssml. And we grab the value that's in here. The same goes for the reprompt, right? We have response.reprompt.outputspeech.ssml. And in this case, you can see reprompt output speech SSML. So this allows us to grab those values directly out of what we just created in our code, save it into our session attributes, and fire that off to Alexa, which means that it'll come back to us the next time as attributes that we can use. If the user says, can you repeat that? We know what we said. We still have the value. It's a very nice, easy way to be able to record all of this information. So with that, let's jump in and make sure that all of our changes are in place. We've taken it out of everywhere else. Let's save and deploy our code. So we'll wait for our deployment to happen. This should only take a couple of seconds. And then we will run over here and give it a test. Okay, so let's start our conversation over with this skill. We're going to say open holiday hacks.
Welcome to Holiday Hacks.
We'll say help.
You can say hello to me. How can I help?
Can you repeat that?
You can say hello to me. How can I help?
And you can see that this information is being stored to our session attributes and returned to us the next time. Very, very powerful. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope you learned something new. In our next session, Amit Jantwani is going to join us in another horribly ugly sweater to talk to you about a really new feature that was just released for Alexa developers. Thanks for tuning in.
Hello Alexa devs, my name is Amit and I am a technical evangelist on the Alexa developer education team. And in this video, I'm going to introduce you to skill rollback. It's a new feature that is now available to all skill developers through the developer console that makes it easier for you to resubmit your skills without the manual recertification process. The skill rollback feature allows you to revert back to a previous live version of your skill. It's like a time machine for your skills. It's super easy to use and it can come in really handy if you've been in situations where you wish there was a way to go back into time and revert back to a known good version of your skill without waiting for the manual recertification process. Now, we've all been in situations where we've rolled a brand new version of our skill and we are super excited about it, except that we discover that the latest version has introduced a bug or has added some kind of friction to the customer experience. Or we are just not getting the kind of feedback we expected from that last update. For example, let's say that you found out through the skills analytics dashboard on the developer console that the recently published version of your skill has a bug, or the new experience that you introduced is causing your customers to stop engaging with your skill altogether because they find that the new experience is either unsatisfying or just plain confusing. And it's now in fact hurting your skills ratings. Now, before rollback, the only option you would have in a situation like this would be to do some kind of skill versioning on your end, find the last known good copy of that, which hopefully you had a backup of locally, and then resubmit the skill for certification, during which time your customers are still getting that buggy experience. But after rollback, this cycle is reduced to you updating the skill, finding any customer frictions through the analytics dashboard or the customer feedback you may have received, and then roll back quickly if necessary. So as you can see, rollback really reduces the amount of time a bad experience is delivered to your customers. With skill rollback, you can revert back to an eligible version through the developer console. Now, behind the scenes, the way all of this works is that we persist the skill versions on our end each time you submit a skill for certification. And we make those versions available to you through the developer console and also the command line interface. So each time you submit your skill, you can add a brief description for the update. So these will be available to you in your version history. So to do that, you simply log into your developer console, navigate to your skill, click on the certification tab, and voila, you see a list of all eligible versions you can revert back to. Just select the version and hit the rollback button. That's it. This process may take 15 to 20 minutes, after which your customers will automatically be directed to this new active version of your skill. No recertification required. This could buy you more time to debug your skill and then submit a new version. Now, few quick things about rollback. One, rollback works on the skill level, not the skill resource level. What that means is that things like skill manifest and the interaction model are included in the rollbacks, but Amazon-owned artifacts like built-in intents, which are built by Amazon, and slots, which are also provided by Amazon, are not rolled back to their older version. Another thing to note is that rollback does not make any changes to a skill that's in development stage. So you can continue working on your development version of your skill. It's only the live version that is actually rolled back. And to begin with, only custom skills and music skills are eligible for rollback. And finally, there are some exceptional cases where your skill may not be eligible for skill rollback, and you can read more about those exceptions here on the link. I will leave you with a few resources to help you get started with skills rollback. We hope you will find this feature useful and that this will help you speed up the iterative process of providing high quality experience to your customers. As always, we can't wait to see what you build with Alexa. My name is Amit Jotwani and wish you all a very happy and safe holidays from all of us here on the Alexa Developer Education team.
Hello and welcome back. I'm really excited about skill rollback and I'm glad Amit was here to share that. In this next segment, I'm going to talk to you about another great set of productivity features for your developers. If you're like me, you found yourself using VS Code more and more over the past few years for your development projects. It's lightweight, it's incredibly extensible, and best of all, it's free. I use Visual Studio Code for all of my Alexa skill development, and with the release of the Alexa Skills Toolkit for VS Code, everything just got a whole lot easier. Let me show you what I mean. As you can see here on my screen, I actually have just a vanilla install of VS Code, and I've added the Alexa Skills Toolkit. So what this gives me is a login. I logged into my developer console credentials, and now I can do a lot of the things here locally that I would normally have done in the console. Let me show you. The first thing that I would do when I choose the toolkit is I can create new skills right from here. I can download and edit skills that I may have only in the console and I want to work on locally, or I can open a local skill. I also have access to all of our technical documentation right from here. This launches pages in a browser, but it's still a great way to be able to dive in and quickly get there. What I want to show you first is the ability to open a local skill and how we can interact and use one. So let's choose Open Local Skill. I'm going to find my project. It's called Chatsino, which is a voice-based casino that I'm working on. And once we get that open, you'll see that in fact I have access to a bunch of information specifically about this skill. So the first thing that I want to show is the skill manifest. We can come in here and we can download this. If you're not familiar with the manifest itself, it's the skill.json file that lives inside your project. And it holds on to things like permissions requests, any kind of access that you might want for things like APL. You have to turn those features on. So all of that is captured in your skill manifest. We also have our interaction model. Many times I find myself making changes to my interaction model in the developer console itself, and then I realize, oh man, I need that locally. And so then I have to go copy and paste it down. Well, this actually allows me to download it directly back into my project. So if I make changes in the dev console, which the tools are good, I like doing that, but I would love an easier way to bring it down to my files here locally. That's how that works. We also have an APL preview, and I'll show you this one. This is actually pretty cool. You can create and download your APL files, but previewing them and being able to work with them here locally is pretty awesome. So when I choose preview, it brings up a list of the APL files that I have in my project. I only have one right now, and it's for a video poker game that I'm working on inside this casino. So I'll open up that file, and you can see here that I have the APL. And then on the right-hand side, I actually get a very nice preview of the 5 cards that are available in the game. So if I scroll over here a little bit, I can show you that I have this 4 of spades listed right here. Now this is dynamic, obviously it changes as the game works, but these are my default values. And if I change this to the king of spades and I save my file, you can see that it instantly updates my preview on the right-hand side. Very convenient, very easy, and if you like working with APL, this is a nice way to be able to interact and play around with what your application is going to look like. But you're also working on the files in your project, which means you have the ability to run it and run it on devices, and the changes you're making are live inside your project. So I think those are all pretty cool to be able to handle some of these things, but one of the biggest features for me is the ability to do local debugging. If you've worked on an Alexa project before, you know that oftentimes you have to deploy not only your interaction model, but also your code out to some server someplace. Maybe it's AWS Lambda, maybe it's somewhere else. And to do that, you have to wait. Maybe it's 60 or 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, depending on how big your project is or how fast your internet connection is. But in any of those cases, you have to wait. And waiting a minute or two is a long time to wait for each little change that you're trying to make to your code. So being able to do local debugging is something that's baked right into VS Code. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to close all these files down. And let's go find a file in my project. So we'll go into Lambda, into my handlers folder, and I have a file called launch request. And on our launch request, I'm going to set a breakpoint. What this will allow me to do is run my skill and then also be able to set breakpoints and see what's happening at that exact moment. So we'll get a terminal open so we can see what's happening here, and let's go to local debugging and choose to debug our Alexa skill. So when I fire this up, it's actually creating a new session that our skill can communicate with, and you can see that it's defined that it'll last for 1 hour. So we would need to start this after an hour, but getting this thing set up and running and being able to debug for an hour is a pretty handy tool. So now that it's running, the other thing that I want to do is test my skill. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just turn and talk to my device, right? Just use it the way I normally would, and that would work just fine. But there's another tool inside the toolkit, which is test skill. And in here, I can actually open the simulator right here locally in my skill as well, or in my in VS Code as well. And so in here, I can say open Chatsino. You can see that it's funneling through my skill, and we hit my breakpoint. So I can go ahead and pass that breakpoint, come back to the simulator, and it's not responding to me. There we go. Welcome to the Chatsino. You currently have 2,419 coins. I can see my JSON input, I can see my JSON output. All of that stuff is captured here. I can also have a device preview. There's no visual content for this one, but I could see exactly what it would look like on the devices. And I can also see the execution info. How did it actually handle all of these pieces as they came in? So really nice. I didn't have to leave this tool at all, and I was able to do not only local debugging with breakpoints, but I was also able to run a simulator right here inside VS Code. I'm really excited about this Alexa Skills Toolkit. It makes my life easier. It solves some problems for me that I was otherwise doing manually, like being able to test without deploying, being able to download my skill manifest and my interaction model, and all of this makes the speed of my development much, much faster. So I didn't have to open a single browser the whole time that I was here. This is a really very exciting thing for me. So I hope you learned a little bit more about VS Code and the Alexa Skills Toolkit, and I hope that your holiday development just got a little easier. You can find the toolkit directly inside VS Code or online at alexa.design/toolkit. And it's time for our fourth and final holiday hack. I'm really excited to share this one with you. I've created a bunch of different skills over time, and I've realized that there's a bunch of helper functions that I generally rely on, things that I've built over time that I reuse over and over. In fact, here, look at my screen. You can see that I have the wrap speech con function that I've created. This allows me to use the speech cons that are natively built into Alexa, but in a way that I don't have to remember any of the syntax. So I can just call this helper function wrap speech con. I pass it the word that I want to say. Maybe it's awesome or bazinga, and it'll wrap it in all of the say as tags that I need for SSML and pass that back to me, and then I can use that however I need. I also have one for change voice. This allows me to change the voice of the user's skill, or at least their experience. And it also saves it to my session attributes so that I can continue to reuse that voice over and over. And I have lots and lots of these functions. And I hate to have to build a new project and then go find these files and import them and bring them into the new project. I want to start from scratch and be able to hit the ground running with everything that I'm used to working with. So the way to do this, I'm very excited to share, is being able to use the ask new command in the CLI and pointing to a new template, an Alexa skill template that you've created. So let me show you how this works. We can close these files down, and we'll just open a terminal. And the other thing that I want to show you is a GitHub repository that I've created. So this is based on the code that you just saw, but you can see that I've stripped pretty much everything away. I have a Lambda function. In here I have that helper file, so we can open that up and see all the things that are happening in there. I have a base index file that has everything written the way I would write it, calling out to specific handlers and getting everything in line, right? It's the way that I like to start with my projects. But as I come back to the top of this, this is a skill repository. It's a GitHub repo that I could use for anything. Now this is private to me. It only makes sense for me to use this, but I use this every single time that I start a new skill. And so the way to do that, the way to make this super easy, if you haven't dug in and looked at the Ask CLI and SMAPI, the skill management API, there's a lot of power there. And this is just one small example of that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is come in here and I'm going to grab a URL to my GitHub repo. And so if you scroll all the way out to the end, you can see this actually ends in .git, but otherwise it's the same URL that's right here. So I'm going to take this and just copy it, and I'm going to come over to my terminal. So I'm going to show you what the normal experience is like. I say ask new, and because of the Ask CLI, I now have the ability to say, oh, I want a Node.js project, I want it to be AWS Lambda, and I'm going to choose a template, right? And these are the templates that they give me access to. But maybe these aren't the ones I want. I want to use one of my own personal ones. So I could choose Hello World, I could give it a name, and we can continue on. I'm going to stop this because I don't actually want to create this project, but I want you to get a feel for what this normal experience looks like. So let's close that and open a new terminal. And this time we're going to say ask new, but in this case we're going to add a template URL property. So this template URL is just pointing at your GitHub repo that you've created. So if you have an existing skill structure, you could save that as a GitHub repo and then use that as a template going forward. Now I recommend ripping everything out that you don't need, that isn't core to just the template, because you don't want to have to spend your time deleting things either, in the way that I don't want to add things. So we have this, but the other thing that I need to do is also tell it what branch of my GitHub repo I want to use. So I'm going to say template, branch, and master. So by doing this, it now asks me where I want to save this. I'm going to say AWS Lambda. Now it's warning me here that, hey, I don't know what that unofficial template is. It could be malicious, and if you've seen my code, it's most certainly malicious. But I'm okay trusting my own code here on my machine, so I'm going to say yes, that's fine. What do I want my skill to be called? We'll call it Holiday Hacks. I spelled it wrong, but that's okay. And we'll leave it, that's fine. That'll be the name of the folder. So it's creating my project for me, and now if we go to you can see that I've got my entire project brought down here. So I can go to CD Lambda. I can see that I've got Amazon folders and all the other things. If we actually open this up, which I don't actually know where I put that. Oh, right here. We can open that up and see all of our files and folders and work on it just like it was any other project. But this is brand new. So the one other thing that you really need to do is to think about things like your skill.json file. One of the things that I like to make sure that I do is make sure that I rip this stuff out. I like to blank this piece right here, because otherwise it's going to publish it to a Lambda function that you've already used before. So I come in and I delete that one line, and now this is a brand new template that I can use every single time that I publish something out. I think this is really exciting. I think this is a very, very cool way to accelerate building new skills, and I think it's super simple. It's made starting a new skill almost effortless for me because I can rely on all the code I regularly use to be there from the start. It's a great way to make your projects work exactly the way you want them to. So I hope you've enjoyed this series. I hope you've enjoyed the ugly sweaters, and I hope you learned a few things along the way. Thank you guys all for tuning in. We really do appreciate you, and we hope to see you very, very soon.